Thank you, guys. Thank you so much. Well, Semper Fi, guys. We got some. It sounds like we got some fans and some haters. That's okay. Listen to what I have to say here, and I'll make my pitch.
J.D. Vance receiving a super warm welcome from the International Association of Firefighters. Despite the booing at the start, Vance did turn it around for a second, sharing a personal story about his interactions with first responders. Take a listen.
You all are the embodiment of American spirit. Heroic, determined, selfless, hardworking, and tough. When I was 12, my mom was in the middle of a terrible, terrible addiction crisis herself. She struggled with it for most of my early childhood. And I remember during a particularly bad episode, I called 911. Like so many kids who have parents who struggle, I called 911. Now the firefighters, the EMTs, and the police came. They calmed her down, but as you all know, they calmed me down too. They calmed my sister down. They did that public service that only they can do. Now, years later, she took something else that she shouldn't have taken. And the firefighters and the EMTs, they saved her life and took her to the hospital where she lay in a coma before eventually waking up. And I want you to know that for us, we did get a second chance. And so if you're ever worried that you're not making a difference, listen to this. From the sad and tearful 12-year-old to a 40-year-old who's now asking to be your vice president, you do make a difference. You make a difference every single day, and I thank you for it.
I think they know they make a difference, but it's a very nice story. And we're glad his mom was saved, but then it took a nosedive, the speech, when Vance began to really give his pitch for the IAFF to endorse him and Trump.
President Trump and I are proud to be the most pro-worker Republican ticket in history. And I want to talk about why we're fighting for working people, why we're going to fight for unions and non-union alike. You may have noticed that Donald Trump is not exactly like Mitt Romney or some of the Republicans of the past. He is a different kind of Republican. And under his leadership, the Republican Party is the party of the American worker. Now just think about the Republican and Democrat conventions we just had. It says a lot who each party chose to put up on that stage. At the Republican convention, we were featuring everyday American workers, and of course, we had Hulk Hogan. And while it's tempting, and I'm sure it would make some big headlines, don't worry, everybody, I'm not going to try to take off my shirt here. But at the Democrat convention, it was a parade of celebrities and billionaires. It felt sometimes like every celebrity except for Hulk Hogan was at the Democratic National Convention.
I mean, the number of flaws in the logic is unbelievable. It's the only celebrity they could get was Hulk Hogan, is why they had Hulk Hogan there. The take the shirt off joke fell super flat. And the argument that his campaign doesn't trot out billionaires, Trump supposedly is a billionaire, that's a big part of their argument. And on top of that, claiming that they're pro-union is laughable. If you just remember, only last week during the X space with Elon Musk, when Trump laughed out loud super heartily at how great Musk is at firing workers who are trying to collectively strike for better conditions. I think it's amazing how you just cut them loose. Cenk?
Yeah. Now, his story about the mom and thanking the firefighters was really nicely done. So credit where credit is due. The rest of it, brutal. So first of all, getting booed by firefighters, if you're a Republican politician, is a terrible look, right? Because they're supposed to be like, oh, we're the macho men, which then makes sense because the firefighters are booing him and he goes, Semper Fi, guys. Wait, Marines and firefighters, what's the connection? Is this some sort of YMCA brotherhood? Okay, are you gonna thank Native Americans next? So like my point is he's saying Semper Fi because he's like, I know you guys are manly men, and so am I because I'm a Marine. And later I'll talk about Hulk Hogan, who's also a manly man. Then I'll talk about ripping off my shirt, but it'll get awkward. Like, brother, you're a venture capitalist. That's what his job was. So look, I don't got any beef with Tim Walz. The only thing that I don't love it when he goes, the people I know in the Midwest didn't go to Yale and all this stuff. Like, I went to good school, so I'm biased, right? And so I don't mind that he went to Yale, but if you go to Yale and then you become a venture capitalist, Please save me like, oh, I'm an average Joe and I am relating to you now. I too like this incredible Hulk Hogan, whoever he is, and I can rip my shirt off too. I am Semper Fi, guys. I am just like you. Are you, brother? Because you certainly don't sound like it. Okay, I got more, but Walz, what do you think?
You know, in a way, I kind of feel bad for JD Vance because it reminds me of the DNC where Bernie gets up there and he's killing billionaires, and it's like, you know, screw these people. They're ruining our country. They're ruining our lives. And literally the very next speech is Pritzker, an actual billionaire heir who gets a primetime slot right after Bernie. And it's like, how can the Democrats actually credibly make the case that they're the party of workers where, like, man, all they do is fet billionaires? And, you know, JD Vance, he's trying his best. Like, to his credit, he's one of the few, like him, Josh Hawley, Republican people who will actually like feign some message of like, yo, like normal people don't like these ultra rich country club dudes. We need to try to pivot away from that. The problem for him is that it's the Republican Party. Nobody's fooled by this. Like, you can't say that Donald Trump is some transformational Republican when his only major legislation when he was president was this huge tax cut for the ultra rich. And as Cenk mentioned early on the show, the only other policy proposal that he's clearly outlined in this run is like, yo, we're gonna cut the corporate tax rate down to 15%. Like, you can't just, he's trying his darndest, but you can't credibly make these arguments, not as a Republican.
Yeah, I mean, I get an overwhelming sense with JD Vance that he's a careerist. You know, he's one of these guys that is an up and comer, and he wrote this book, which I explained before, which I think was kind of largely identity politics. Hey, I'm a victim too because I might not be black or a minority or anything like that, but I'm a hillbilly. And hillbillies are also kind of an identity, and that kind of worked in the Yale circles, and they were like, oh yeah, look at that, we've got someone else here. Let's see, we found a hillbilly. Okay, and that's like a super like liberal, hilarious thing, right? And so then he becomes a venture capitalist and a very careerist thing. And then if you don't know, his pivot into politics is backed by Peter Thiel, who's a Silicon Valley, you know, I don't know if he must be a billionaire by now, but like a very right-wing libertarian, et cetera, and certainly among the elites. I mean, if Peter Thiel's not an elite, I don't know who is. And so he personally like bankrolled JD Vance's career and got him on the map. So this guy, funded by a giant donor who himself was basically a banker, I really think culturally he can't relate to the average guy. You know, even though he grew up poor with, you know, mom who's addicted, et cetera, in Ohio, he's led the great majority of his life in these elite circles. So that's why, like, if I'm talking to firefighters, even if they're booing me, I could get past that in a second. We could talk about our connections and how we might not agree on this, but we agree on that, right? And talk about how my, you know, nephew was a volunteer firefighter, just some human connection. But JD Vance has a lot of trouble with that. So he's like, hey guys, Semper Fi. That counts, right? I did that thing that other Americans do, right? Okay, yeah, you did, brother, and I appreciate your service and that you were a Marine, but the rest of your life story is, and the way you act and the way you talk is super elitist, pretending to be a populist.
There's a little bit more of the story as well, because both parties are currently trying to receive IAFF's endorsement, which endorsed Biden back in 2020. Democratic vice presidential nominee Tim Walz spoke at the same event the day prior. Walz, a union member himself, said he and Vice President Kamala Harris will fight to protect firefighters' benefits, compensation, and safe working conditions. As a governor, Walz said he bolstered resources for firefighting training and education. Currently, Harris and Walz have been endorsed by a number of unions, including United Auto Workers, United Steel Workers, Service Employees International Union, the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees. Trump and Vance only been endorsed by two: the Milwaukee Police Association and the International Union of Police Associations. Vance asked the union to ignore the party rhetoric and focus on people's records. He added he was once a never Trumper, but changed his stance after a firefighter friend's comments about pension raises and Trump's commitment and dedication to the health, the safety, and the prosperity of our fire responders. I highly doubt that that's what flipped Vance, was this one man's statement rather than the chance to, like Cenk said, up his career to the nth degree. While it's unclear whether or if IAFF will make an endorsement, they do know what it is they want and what they don't want. Charles Huddleston from Ohio told Newsweek that IAFF workers like, quote, anyone that supports the union regardless of political party, close quote. And at least some of the IAFF don't want Trump, according to the outfits they wore for Vance's speech. Take a look at this image with t-shirts saying Trump is a scab. Yeah, it's always very clear when political candidates try to claim union affiliation, try to claim support for the unions, but it's very rare to actually have a candidate who himself was a union member. I can share quickly that when I ran for president in 2020 and I spoke at the AFL-CIO convention in Altoona, Iowa, along with every other major candidate, and Biden and Bernie and everybody are there, and I spoke about how I'm in the union they are in, because in SAG-AFTRA we're a signatory of AFL-CIO, and how they know for a fact I will fight for them because I actually need the same changes that they need. And they gave me a standing ovation for that. And the Des Moines Register, the paper of note that makes or breaks candidates, didn't mention that at all. They had a whole section in the article saying candidates tout union ties, and talked about a more corporate candidate who said his grandfather was in the union. Also speaking at the event, Beto O'Rourke, Ben Glebe, and Joe Sestak. I read a letter to the editor complaining about that. They print it days later in the back page and nobody cares. So to have somebody who actually has been a union man in his life, in the teachers union, and Tim Walz, you know this person is going to support union workers. And it's just smoke coming from Vance and Trump.
Yeah, and Tim Walz has a track record, and he's just excellent. Yeah. So that's why it's super hard to knock him down on these things. And last thing I'll say is, man, Sean Fain did a brilliant job at the DNC with that Trump is a scab t-shirt. Now it's everywhere, and it's just reminding workers nonstop that Trump is not on your side. He thinks it's great when you get fired. His signature line on the show that made him famous is "You're fired." And he doesn't back striking workers. He thinks they should be fired. He doesn't back unions. So if they're trying to get more union votes, they're gonna have an awfully hard time this time around.
Yeah, people aren't dumb, I don't think. And again, I think Trump, honestly, is just a unique figure. Like, it is a cult of personality. I think the reason why O'Brien with the Teamsters went up there and spoke is because like a nice majority of his Teamster membership are Trump supporters, man. Like, as crazy as that is, right? And this guy has never in his life done anything that was pro-union, right? I think this is just a Trump thing. So I understand JD Vance being like, look, don't pay attention to the decades, if not centuries long history of Republicans and that party absolutely abhorring every single union that's ever been known to man. Reagan, busting up the unions in the 80s, that being the policy of the party for like literally 100 years, guys. Ignore the past 100 years of history. And just believe what Donald Trump tells you. It's tough.
Yeah, not gonna work this time. Thanks for watching The Young Turks. We really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.